Okay. Well, let's go ahead and we'll go for it. Like I said, it's great to have a smaller group. Um, I am just going to share my little outline of the what's and whys and wheres here. So let me just do that. Share my screen. I'll just do this. This isn't very complete or anything like that. I just wanted to make sure that everybody had the framework in place. And so forgive me if I'm repeating things that you know already. The primary purpose of having this session today that we're in is to get people ready for tomorrow's contribution day. Make sure that you don't have to spend your whole day trying to get a local development environment set up. The secondary purpose is to introduce you to introduce you to the DDEV way of having a local environment, so that you have that. So those are the two purposes, and you're welcome here for any of those purposes, and you're welcome to ask questions about anything, anytime. That's the lovely thing about having just a nice small group here, is feel free to comment, bring things up, say what you think is important. Feel free to unmute anytime you want. With a group this size, we are in great shape, so that's good. So why do you need a local environment in the first place? It's like really, really important to have a place where you can experiment and work predictably, and not be working on a server or something that doesn't have a controlled environment, or something that you might mess up, or something that you might be careful around. You don't want to have to be careful when you're doing development. You need to be able to take all the risks that you want and do stuff and make it work or not. And you want to be able to have a repeatable situation. People who have a shared dev server or who work on a server, on a live server, they never know what they're working against, because, well, their colleague might have already changed something. It's a very bad situation. So having a space that is your own is a key thing, so that you know how to get it to an exact situation that you want it to be in, and that you can get to the right branch or the right code. This all has to do with having your own source control as well, and knowing Git, which we've all come to know and love in the last 10 or 15 years. So now the next question is, all the cool kids are using Docker-based local environments now. So almost everybody is using DDEV or Lando or Doxel, which are all three wrappers around Docker Compose, which is another wrapper around Docker. There's all kinds of great reasons for it, and I know that several people here have been using VirtualBox or Vagrant with VirtualBox, and it was a time-honored thing. In fact, I spent 2 or 3 years with Tag One maintaining a company's local environment using Vagrant, and it used Puppet to build their environment exactly the same as the server. And it was great, but it was very, very resource intensive, could take ages to build. And VirtualBox is kind of fading out of use on both Mac and Windows and Linux now. It's always been a little iffy, but on Windows you can't use it. Well, you can use it with Hyper-V, but it slows down quite a bit. On Mac, it just doesn't seem like people are using it. And on Linux, it's hard to understand why to use it. So VirtualBox does seem to be going away. And I don't know whether any of you were there on, was it yesterday or Wednesday when they were doing a local setup of Night Watch, and you saw all the trouble that Mike Herschel had with trying to do it locally, piece by piece. When you set up, you can set up your own local environment using regular tools like Nginx. Nginx will run on any of these environments, Windows even, but you're setting up your computer for a specific situation, and then when you need to change it, you have to change your computer, and it doesn't work for that other project you're working on. So when you use a Docker-based local environment, you're not changing the configuration on your workstation. You have a consistent web server setup. So if you're using DDEV, you can change the PHP version just by changing a config. You can change the MariaDB version just by changing a config. And a team can check in their config, and they'll all have the same results. And so I imagine that some of you have been in the position where your teammates or collaborators are trying to get their local environment set up, and you have to spend all your time keeping the team's environment going. And that's not what you wanted to do. You wanted to be developing instead. So sharing config with it as a team is really important. So
one more thing just to add about VirtualBox. Going through the threads and forums now with the upcoming M1 Apple chips, VirtualBox seems to not working there, so that would probably also create another shift of using it less and less.
Yeah, VirtualBox is never expected to work on the M1 because of a problem with the M1. It doesn't do virtualization. It doesn't do emulation, so it can't run AMD 64. So the M1 can't do AMD 64. It can't do the Intel architecture, and that's a problem also for Parallels. By the way, a little plug for Parallels. If you were using, if you're on an AMD 64 Mac anyway, and you were using VirtualBox, Parallels is so great. It is so much better than using VirtualBox. It's so reliable, great performance. It does cost $100 a year or something, but it's way worth it. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, Matt.
I think, when we're talking about repeatable environments, if you still need to use Vagrant and VirtualBox, that's okay, because part of why you have those things is to make it production-like, and I think there's still a use case for using Puppet and Chef in your local environment, because you do want to match those expectations. So if where you're deploying to is a Puppet-based system, it's it is wise to keep it as consistent as possible. But if you're deploying to a Kubernetes or container-based environment, then it probably makes more sense to switch over to something similar, so you have that repeatability and the consistency between your local and so what that means is when you make a change locally, you have a very high expectation that that change is going to work in your remote environments, in production or stage or development or whatever. And so if depending on how what your production environment is, VirtualBox may still be something that you need to use, but more and more people are moving over to those container-based deployment patterns, and so something it could be better to shift over your local, so you have that repeatability and consistency.
I think it's really important to emphasize that the bottom line is repeatability in a known environment and a local environment. That's the bottom line. There really is nothing wrong with VirtualBox or Vagrant. There's really nothing wrong with a hand-done local environment if it meets your needs. If you can build it consistently and maintain it consistently. But it's just VirtualBox, the weight of it is the thing at this point. So I've been thinking, I've found a number of people who have been asking recently, like they're new to Docker, they're wondering what in the world all this is, or they come to DDEV and they start trying to use Composer directly, and they wonder why their Composer isn't configured correctly, and they're not using Composer inside the container. So I'm trying to think through how to explain how this stuff works. And this is the same with DDEV, Orlando, or Doxel. At Docker, essentially, DDEV and all the other tools essentially use Docker Compose to start little isolated virtual Linux computers. They're like several little Linux computers running inside VirtualBox or wherever. I mean, that's not exactly the technology, but that's the easiest way to think about it. So when we learn how to use DDEV and we start out and do it, DDEV is going to start up a web server container, and it's going to start up a DB container and a couple others that you don't have to think about right now. But normally it starts up 4 or 5 little containers, which you can think of as little Linux computers. And you can actually SSH into them and do things inside of them. And all the web serving is happening inside the web server container. And all the database serving is happening inside the DB container. And that might be like your deployment environment, but it is not happening on your workstation or on your laptop. Well, it is happening there, but it's happening in a completely isolated environment. So I'm hoping to write a little intro to the architecture of DDEV to try to help people understand that, because I find that newcomers often just don't necessarily understand what's going on at the beginning. Do you have any questions or comments on Docker?
Hi, really. I put something in the chat regarding what you just said with using DDEV Composer instead of just Composer. I just pasted in the, usually when I do a Composer project, I just do what you see right there in the chat, with the exception of DDEV. And so, yeah, so that's as simple as that, right? That's what you're saying.
Unfortunately, I can't see the chat. So I'll have to figure out how to see the chat here. Let me see. There we go. Yeah, that is exactly the technique. Although in general, I try not to give it an explicit version, but that works perfectly. And we will actually, since you said that, let's just go. And I'll just share my screen and share my whole desktop, and maybe that will help me a little bit. I still have trouble with the rest, but if we just go to Google and we say DDEV Drupal 9 Quick Start, we will end up just in the docs at the right place in the Quick Start. Look, it has a 159 still being found in there. So here's the Drupal 9 Quick Start, and so this is just the basics of what we recommend here. Can you see that okay? Yeah. So this is what you would do if you needed to just create a regular project, not a Git checkout project. We're going to be, we'll talk about Quick Sprint in a minute, but we're going to do a Git checkout project because it's more appropriate for tomorrow's events. But basically, you just do the config in a new directory, start it up, which is actually optional because the Composer Create will do it for you. This will bring up a Drupal 9.1 project at right now, and then every Drupal project needs Trush. So that's it, and DDEV Launch just pops a browser for you. So that's basically what happened. So that, just to follow up on what you said. So any other comments or?
What you just said is in place of just running the steps on the quick starter is what you're saying would be the right way to do it instead of just running that one command, DDEV create project, blah, blah, blah.
Well, it's essentially the same. You were just simplifying it down to the one command. So
okay. Yeah, you had the one. Oh, all right. Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah. So what you were saying is exactly right. I was just saying that to put it in context, you have to do a couple of things like make a directory and config the directory.
Okay, right. Mm-hmm. I get it. Yeah.
Randy, can I ask you a quick question?
You betcha.
What's the difference between quick sprint and quick start?
So I'm going to talk about what quick sprint is in a minute, but this is in the docs. The quick start is just a way of talking about the fact that this is what you do. So it's not a project or anything like that.
Okay. Okay. So if I had my own, PHP Storm or something, and I didn't want to use all the things in quick sprint, I could just do these individual commands.
You can do that. Yes, absolutely. You can do that. Everybody, like I was saying, everybody's local environment is fine as long as you know how to make it work for what you want to accomplish tomorrow or whatever day it is, So everybody's, however you want to do it is fine. I actually, we're going to talk about quick sprint in a minute, but I have one reservation about quick sprint is that people tend to think that quick sprint itself is important, and it mostly isn't. Quick sprint is just a way at a conference to get a lot of people to the same place at the same time. And for people's long-term knowledge, I actually prefer that they know how to just use DDEV and not because quick sprint is basically two things. Well, we'll go on to that.
Hey, Randy, can I just
you betcha.
Interject one moment? Confusingly, quick start means multiple things. And what we're talking about here when we talk about quick start is specific to DDEV's documentation. So if you're looking to spin up your DDEV, an environment for your Drupal project with DDEV, and that the term quick start here means going into the documentation and being able to do that specific task. There's also another terminology in the Drupal community where quick start means the three-step way of getting a quick Drupal demo up and running on your local computer without Docker, without VirtualBox, and you only need PHP and Composer. So just to add that in the mix, so if you're searching for the terms quick start, and you may, in Drupal, you may find that instead of what you intended to search for, which was DDEV quick start or DDEV quick sprint or Drupal quick sprint. So just to clarify for those people watching later or just keeping in the back of your mind, there is that terminology as well. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So what is Quick Sprint? So Quick Sprint is a project that was Quick Sprint is a project that was originally built for these conventions and stuff, because the internet is typically terrible and we want people to get to the same place at the same time. And so what we would do is hand out the whole thing on a flash drive or on a local LAN or whatever, or get people to pre-download it. And then we can have people all start up at the same time without having to do huge downloads, and also doing the, just doing exactly, going through the steps. And so for those of you that want to today, especially those that are new to DDEV or that are new to core development, if you're planning on working on the theme tomorrow, we will go through the quick sprint install, and it's if you want to use it and you haven't already downloaded it, it's here in releases over here on the right. And I think that was in the links of everything too. Let me just put that. Okay. But I have to quit to be able to paste it. So, okay.
On the release page, there are two sets of kind of packages. There's the Drupal Sprint package and then third-party installs. If you've never used Docker before, you'll need to download both of those packages. If you're comfortable with Docker, then you really need the Drupal Sprint package tarball.
On Windows, you need the git install as well. So if you're using traditional Windows.
Thank you, Randy.
Yeah. So anyway, so here, so it was built for in-person events, but we have found that having everybody on the same page at the same time with the same package is worth something even on virtual events. So if you feel free to go ahead and download that now. If you haven't downloaded it and if you'd like to walk through it with us, it builds a Drupal core contribution environment, which is Git based. It's not a composer create project. So it's built in a way that you can do patches against Drupal core. So that's the basic ideas for core development. And really, if you've set up with Quick Sprint and you want to go forward with DDEV, the only thing that's different is that you really will probably want to actually remove the manually installed DDEV binary, usually in user local bin on Mac or Linux. Remove that and install it in the normal way, which is, usually Homebrew or Chocolatey or something like that. So actually on Windows, you can just switch to Chocolatey, say Chocolatey install DDEV, and it'll Choco install DDEV, and it'll be right there. So, okay, any questions before we go forward?
Which package should we install from that link?
So do you have Docker already on your computer?
No, I don't think so. I'm on my personal computer.
Okay, so what you'll want to do is you'll want to download both of those.
And so another question would be,
okay,
if you're on Windows, it's going to depend kind of on Windows or Mac or Linux. So if you're on Windows, you may not be able to extract the tar.gz files first. And since Windows has native zip file support, so there's the zip file is mainly for Windows users, whereas tar.gz files are easier to use for on macOS and Linux.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're looking at Zoom. Now you're looking at a browser window, is that correct?
yes.
All right. Is everything readable, or is the font size a little too small?
That's good.
All right, so just to recap, we're going to go ahead and click on the releases here. The latest release, it's 1.53. And you can go ahead and start downloading the Drupal Sprint package 1.53 here. And then also if you haven't installed Docker in a long time or do not have Docker yet, click the Quick Sprint third-party installs link here as well. This one right there, and that one right there.
So I downloaded that highlighted .tar.gz file. Was there something else I was supposed to download?
Sorry, I was trying to get the chat here. You want to download the Drupal Sprint package 1.53 tar.gz, this the one here that's highlighted. And then in order to, we also package Docker, the Docker installer in this Quick Sprint third-party installs .v1.53.tar.gz, so that you'll want that one as well.
Even if I already have Docker running?
If you already have Docker running and installed, and it's a fairly recent in the last year or so, 2.5 years, you don't need to download this Quick Sprint third-party installs.
Yeah.
If you do have Docker running, let's make sure and you use Lando or DDEV or Doxal or any other Docker solution. Let's go ahead and make sure that you've stopped on any of your running environments.
How would I do that?
Did you say, how did you do that? I'm sorry. I didn't
Say, how would I do that?
How would you do that? Okay, so if you're going to want to open up a terminal window in either on Mac or on Linux, and of course I can't see anything now. You can run. Can you read my terminal here at the top?
Yeah, I'm just seeing a prompt right now. A temp prompt.
You can run the Docker command. And this is just pure Docker commands. Docker PS will show you any running containers.
Okay. Ooh.
And there's a container ID here that you can copy, and you can always run Docker stop that container ID. And this is manual Docker commands. This is not if you're running Lando, there should be a command where you change directory into your Lando directory and you call Lando stop or something like that. I'm not a Lando expert.
Yeah, it's Lando stop.
So you'll want to do that, or if you already have a DDEV environment and it's currently running, you'll want to change directory into into your DDEV project directory that you already have and run DDEV stop. So when you've downloaded so you've downloaded these two packages, or they're downloading, you can also click back on the code here and scroll down, and you'll see the README. And this is what essentially I'm going to run through as well. And to overview, the first thing to do is getting the files. So that's what you should be doing already by going through the releases page. So we're already past step 1. The second step is you're going to extract these two packages. The example here shows zip, but we're using tar.gz. Let's say I've downloaded these two tarballs to the same directory. When you extract them, it'll put everything into the same directory. So as an example, let's see, in a temporary directory here, I have a whole bunch of these things. And I'm going to run a tar ZXF, which is going to extract a tarball. And then I'll provide the Drupal Sprint package. By doing the ls command in my terminal, I'll see Drupal sprint package. And so now I can do the quick sprint. I can extract the quick sprint third-party installs. And what this is doing is it's going to extract it in that same Drupal sprint package directory. Now, if there are a lot of Linux users here, we don't include Docker with for any Docker installer for Linux because there's so many distributions. So in order if you're on Linux and you don't have Docker installed, you'll want to click on this Linux instructions here link. And I think most people are using one of these distributions. And so there should be instructions for downloading Docker and Docker Compose for your distribution. I'm the oddball out. I use Slackware, so I have I'm down here in other, and I download binaries manually. If you're on a Mac, you can open up the Drupal sprint package directory that they've extracted in Finder, and when you're looking at that, you're going to see a installs directory, and so you can double clicking on that. You can see this Docker DMG file, so that will contain the Docker installer, which you can then install. So that would be, I think now I've skipped ahead past the Drupal sprint directory to the install Docker and other requirements step. So the fourth one, after you install Docker, you'll want to make sure it's running. That's something I've forgotten in the past, is to make sure that my Docker is running. And I'm like, why isn't this working? Oh, I need to run Docker. So if you're on Linux, there's probably a service in a systemd service or definition to start Docker. If you're on Mac, once you install it, it may run by itself, or you could use the Spotlight search tool to search for the Docker application or Docker desktop and start running that. And it will take a little bit to start up. Docker desktop for Mac and Docker desktop for Windows these days, when it starts, it'll pop open a window and it might ask you to log in or create a Docker account. You don't need to do this when you're installing Docker. You can safely just close those windows. So I already have Docker installed, and if I was installing from scratch, I have my own system in place. Sorry, you're gonna watch me fat finger my thing. I'm gonna do this in a different window so I don't I don't feel pressure. But I'm gonna so right now I'm just being nervous. Really? Okay. We're gonna pretend I restarted Docker. If you can't laugh at yourself, all right. So I've installed Docker, it's running. I can test that it's running by doing that. For Quick Sprint, the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to open a terminal. I'm going to make sure I'm in the Drupal sprint package, and then I'm going to run install.sh like that. And this is the same as if you're on a Mac or on Linux. And it's going to tell you what it's doing here. It's going to install the DDEV-Local development tool. It's going to preload all of the Docker images that you just downloaded. so you don't have to download them. And then it's going to create a directory within your home directory called Sprint. I already have the images loaded, but let me. So for you, it'll probably scroll by a lot of kind of gibberish or hashes will scroll by. At the bottom here, it's going to print out this useful information. So we want to make sure we don't forget to read this. So it's going to tell you in a new window. So we want to open up a new terminal window, go back, back into that Drupal Sprint package directory. And so, we want to refer back to what it says. So we want to run the mkcert-install command. And then it's going to say, okay, now change directory into the Sprint, your home directory /Sprint. So again, let me go back to the instructions here just to say, and we're on step 5. So I want to change the directory into the Sprint directory. I have one extra step I have to do, in that since I'm special, I'm just going to be in my Python environment. And again, the last thing it's going to tell me to do is run start sprint. And what this is going to do is it going to create a directory kind of like what's up here, sprint. It's going to create a new environment every time you run the start sprint command. With the current year, month, and day, and hour and minute. Once it brings up it's going to start these Docker containers. And once it finishes starting those Docker containers, it's going to install Drupal for you, or update Drupal to the latest 9.2x, which is the development release. Run Composer inside the container, and then install Drupal.
Okay, I'm getting the unable to listen on required ports, the port 80 message, which I was getting before, but when I look at the config.yaml file, I don't see a reference to port 80. I had changed it to like some other port.
Oh, wait. So okay, so I think what that means is if you're running on Linux.
Yeah.
I have run into this in the past when I was on an older version of my Linux distribution.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, updating it eventually went away, but it,
well, I'm thinking about rebooting. I'm wondering if it's some hangover from somebody else.
You might have another environment running on there, but it should bind. What it's trying to do is it's binding. You see how it says 8080 here?
Uh-huh.
Yes, this is the public port, but there is the inside the Docker container, and we're getting kind of into the technical details here. There is a DDEV router container. I think we saw it here. This DDEV router container is running Nginx, and that is trying to bind to port 80.
Are you changing it in the config YAML in the DDEV? Within DDEV? Because I ran into that issue and I always have to change the port to another one from 80. I usually use 8,000.
I've tried various values of that port.
In that folder though, the config
I'm
file.
not sure. I'm not sure I'm in the right folder.
Yeah, so it's a hit. It's, well, for me, you know, I know you might be in terminal, but it's the DDEV.DDEV folder, the config YAML. I think that'll do it if you find it, and make sure it's changed there.
Okay.
So I think this might be slightly different. The DDEV config YAML that gets auto configured here in Quick Sprint already has. Okay, here's another thing before I get into that. We've run that start sprint, and so I'm still in this sprint directory. So I kind of want to make sure I change into the the specific environment. So it created this directory here. And in this directory, there's a Drupal directory. So I actually want to change into that as well. So my configure DDEV project is in here.
So I have two of those directories, one ending in -1213 and one ending in -1227. So which one should I use?
Did you run the start sprint multiple times?
I don't know, maybe.
These are encoded with the date. So if it's 2021-03-26, that's today.
Yeah.
And so whatever the latest one is there is the one you want to be in.
I'll remove the other one.
If you haven't used DDEV before, you probably want to not just remove that directory. So if I go into my old one here, and I go into the Drupal folder here, I want to run DDEV's remove -o. And that will remove all the containers and kind of clean up and DDEV, and it'll just kind of clean that project up.
Okay.
If you just delete the directory, it will leave things some DDEV configuration, and so DDEV might think you still have that site, but then it can't find the files.
Okay, so I did that. I removed those containers.
And then it would be safe to come here and remove that. All right, so I'm going to go back to my current local environments Drupal folder, and just kind of describe what's going on here. There's this is Drupal core, just checked out, a clone of Drupal core. There's this DDEV directory here, and that's where everything is kind of pre-configured, and we shouldn't need to do anything there. But if I want to stop my project from now on, because if it's running, this is where I'd be like, okay, I can run DDEV describe, tell me what the state of this site is, and I can run DDEV stop to stop doing things, just like we were doing if we were removing it. And if I want to try again, I can type DDEV start. So now that you've deleted that problematic old one, why don't you come back into this other Drupal directory, sprint hyphen whatever the date is /Drupal, and run DDEV start or DDEV stop or DDEV restart.
Okay, DDEV.
The restart command will stop and then restart again.
Okay, so DDEV restart, stopping DBA web DB.
So, and just for everyone else, I'm going to go ahead and copy. It'll give you both a regular site or an HTTP site and an SSL version, and just to show it's kind of working here.
Bugger. Still getting it's giving me port 80 is already in use, which I find confusing. Is it really trying to access port 80, or is that just a generic message?
I believe that is, again, the DDEV router.
Yeah, it is
It's
DDEV
DDEV
router.
router.
Because if I do DDEV status, it says, or if I do
And-
DDEV describe, it says the router's not healthy.
And what I remember about this is this is a permissions issue with how Docker is set up
Mhm.
on your specific Linux distribution. And if you didn't install Docker this time,
Mhm.
perhaps
Okay, I can go back and reinstall it. Can you?
yeah, try to update Docker to the latest one, which might kill all of your images and containers.
Okay.
I did that this last week. I updated from Docker 1903 to
Mhm.
20.10, I think, and I had to. All my containers were gone.
Okay, so I'm on Docker 2010. Is that
So that's mine.
2010.5? Yeah, same as you.
Okay, so at this point, I've kind of run through things. I wanted to cover something extra before I start. I'll stop sharing and we'll kind of see where everyone else is at. And that is Matt Glaman yesterday, wanted, and for tomorrow wanted to show how to run night watch tests as part of contributing to Drupal core. And there are a couple of files here. I think his was on a new beyond. No, it's Bluehorn Digital. I don't know why I said beyond. But he has this GitHub project. I'm going to go ahead and paste this into chat, which I haven't been paying attention to, and I'm sorry. Whoops, I'm sorry, Joanne. I did not mean to do that. And there's a couple of files here that we can actually just download and see this DDEV directory. I can just download this Docker Compose YAML directly, or I can copy and paste the contents. It doesn't matter. So if I did that and I said, okay, actually, let me stop my, I don't have to. Was it Docker Compose testing YAML? So I can paste that directly in. And then he has these two commands, one night watch and one PHP unit. Now, these I can't actually use directly. I need to modify them. And the one modification is I need to just change it so it's instead of going one directory up, I'm actually like that. And the same with the other one. So if you look here, it's just we're one directory, we're / vendor, but in our quick sprint, we're actually just vendor bin PHP unit. We don't have to be one directory above. And this will get us set up for doing Olivero work tomorrow. This is something that's new. I stumbled into Matt's presentation on Twitch the other day. Wait, that's not what I want. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to have it var www.html/core. So if I in my Drupal environment here, right, I have my DDEV directory. If I run DDEV restart, it's going to stop the containers, and it's going to pick up that I've made this change to and added this new YAML file. And this might take a little while because it's going to have to pull in this new container. But I should now be set up to run those night watch tests. All right, so if I run DDEV, I can see that I have a new command called night watch. And I can run that. Oh, I don't actually have all the dependencies. So what I need to do is type DDEV SSH first. So this will put me into the container. I need to go into the core directory inside the container. If you're on Linux, you can do this outside, but it's safer just to do it inside the container. If you're on a Mac or on Windows, you would need to do this inside the container. I can then run yarn. I need to run yarn install. Running this inside the container again keeps our environment consistent. And remember what Randy was talking about earlier. We want reliability and consistency in our environment. Okay, so now I should be able to run that command. And this will run all the night watch tests in core. That'll probably take a while, maybe about 2 minutes. Okay, I don't think we need to actually see that run, but that's our goal today is to get set up not only with Quick Sprint, but for core development, but to also add in this extra step for tomorrow so that we can work on Olivero. So I'm going to stop sharing. And now I want to see where everyone else is at with their environments.
I'm just working through the extra Linux steps right now.
Now that I'm looking at chat, Mike, so you get the permission denied on the Docker daemon socket. If you run, when you get back to having Docker installed, can you make sure you run Docker PS to see if it's running? I see you said sudo docker run. So you probably need to you might need to add your user, have a group to be able to run Docker. Okay, so and Pana, is that your name? Did I pronounce that correctly? So you're stuck at the post installation steps for Linux. So at this point, I think what we want to do is probably the best is to share your screen. But to do that, I probably want to stop recording or pause the recording. Just so we don't share things.
Was I on mute that whole time? Because I was talking to you.
Oh,
about how
yes, I think so.
I was running it. I was running. I was going through the Linux post install documentation for Docker, and that seems to be getting close. What you said is correct. I think I need to get my user in that special Docker group, which I believe I did, and then it looks like there might be other stuff I might need to do.
So my Docker installation gave me a Docker user and Docker group. So if you type the groups command and right, you can see what groups you're in.
Yeah, I'm in the Docker group, but I tried that Docker PS and there's nothing running right now.
But you didn't get an error.
Right, I didn't get an error just trying to run Docker PS.
Did you run it with sudo or did you run it with your current user?
Current user. So I might be able to try it again, try running the install, but I'll just try it. Why not?
Okay, so now, yeah, go ahead and try that, and let's kind of look at the other thing. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording since we're doing more support stuff at the moment.
Okay, it looks like it's working now.